Welcome to Not Ashamed. I'm your host, Ashley Nordman, and today I have a special guest. I'm so excited to chat with you, Cory. Cory Procter is a former professional football player, and now you run and own a wealth management company. So thank you so much for being here, Cory.
Oh, thanks, Ashley. I'm excited. Let's talk about skincare and other cool stuff.
Yeah, we can talk about skincare, football, all the things. We can just hit every topic. How about that?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's just jump in here. So take me back. What was it like being a Dallas Cowboy?
It was cool. Played 6 years overall, started in Detroit my rookie year, 4.5 years with the Dallas Cowboys, and then ended in Miami in 2010 with the Dolphins. It is awesome. It's definitely a circus because it is an entertainment business, even though it revolves around a sport. It has its own unique stresses. You know, I was a bubble guy, which is usually like near the bottom of the roster. They liked me a whole lot, but they're always looking for somebody better. And really that's all positions. But I never had a large contract to really solidify any sort of time. And even then, there's a lot of guys right now who get some of these contracts and they drop them after a year, which is wild to even think, but it's a real thing. And so I was kind of a guy that was always they were always trying to replace. And so there's a bunch of stress that comes with that, constantly seeing people brought in. I couldn't articulate that till later, but it's a heavier feeling, especially if you had a bad game or something, and then all of a sudden you got four. You got to have some thick skin to be able to handle it, but there's a lot of layers to that when it comes. It's a unique experience, that's for sure. Really cool, but also a high-stress environment.
That's really important to touch on, I feel like, because I was involved in a lot of sports growing up too, and nothing to the extent of you, but I remember having coaches where they made it very known that you were replaceable, and there was just such a feeling of stress, like underlying all the time, because you always felt like you had to be performing, and if you just made that one mistake, you were going to be gone. And in some ways, it was a positive if you had the right mindset, because it fueled you to be the best you possibly could, because you didn't want to like even do 1% less than you were capable of, because you could be replaced. But at the same time, it was such a stress, like trying to like uphold that all the time. So I imagine that was so tough.
It is. You know, I hated it if you were down on me. Everything that I could do in my power to make that right with you, if you were down on me in some way, I would be doing all those things. And that actually came to a little bit of a detriment in my last couple of years playing, where I let that get to me. And I think it was good because I ended up getting hurt in Miami. I ruptured my patella tendon on a Thursday night game against Chicago. And
yeah, you're playing the Bears, where I'm from.
Yeah. It wasn't a good game. But it was crazy because it was a short alley screen. I had to shuck the nose tackle, get him upfield, and get up to the Mike linebacker, who was Brian Urlacher at the time. And so I over pursued him, took the wrong angle. He ran underneath me. I planted my left leg to come back, and my kneecap split in half. And a lot of times when I tell that story on stage, people immediately gasp, like, "Did you die?" And I'm like, well, I didn't die, so that's a good thing, you know? But
Yeah.
I actually passed out from that. I woke up to Kevin O'Neill, our head trainer, slapping me in the head. And, you know, all of a sudden I'm waking up to the end of my career, essentially, and a whole bunch of surgeries. And so it was a tough place to be. But when that injury happened, I was engaged to my wife. That exit was essentially kind of communication, basically from God, that, hey, I'm trying to make a husband, not a football player anymore. And so it was cool because we got the first 2 years of our marriage together having to lean on her for the first time, when she would have told you football absolutely came before her, and I would have denied that all day long. But I could look back on that now and say, yeah, it was true. It was a unique experience in the NFL. I'm thankful for my time because it's propelled a whole lot of good in my life. But a common question I get is, what would you give to go back, or would you go back? And I'm like, no, because now we have us. It's our life, and I'm super thankful for it.
I love your perspective, though, because you saw it as just like a positive opportunity instead of looking at it as a victim and, you know, oh, this ruined my life. Instead, it just pivoted your life and led you in a new direction and brought you closer to now this beautiful family that you have with 3 little kids. And I just think that's a really cool perspective. And clearly there was a purpose for that, because now you've transitioned your career into something completely different and are doing extremely successful with it, which is awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And you know this because I'm sure you have your own cuts, but we all have those. I tell you, you can tell the difference between a mature and an immature perspective or attitude. A lot of times, and not everybody comes to this, but a lot of times the more mature perspectives usually come from a lot of cuts or some pretty deep cuts. I was talking to my brother about this morning because he lost his son to something severe. So he's had those deep cuts. And the reason we got on that conversation was somebody had recently passed this last night. And in this passing, it was a friend of mine. He labored for the last 18 hours of his life after he was taken off life support. And you think of like something in that situation, somebody passes pretty quickly, but nobody wants to see that. But the perspective coming out of those deeper cuts in our life was interesting to come into this, because I kept sitting here thinking, and I was sharing with his son who was going through this, how he has the capacity to take this torch on, how to take this from his dad and move on and carry the family. Normally we go into this place of loss, or maybe it was cut, getting cut from the NFL, not playing there anymore, or cut from a job or a shift or something in our lives, or a loss that can really send us to a dark place and a really detrimental place that doesn't help us at all. But coming out of that, there can be a lot of excellent perspective if you let yourself mature to that, right? And so in this, what was so neat about it to me was this labor, this battle, those last 18 hours of this life. Man, this is amazing to be able to see this guy fight this fight and give such an example to everybody who was in the room. If he was able to labor that long and for that kind of exhaustion that he would take on and still have to keep fighting for that last breath, even into the passing, that's such an amazing example of somebody I want to be like. And how cool that is to hear his daughter tell him how proud of him she is. And all I could sit here and think about, man, that's something I want to hear from my girls when I'm going. Like, life, happiness is fleeting, right? But if we have a bigger target to hit, then, we have to elevate that perspective in order to hit it. Otherwise, we just flounder.
Absolutely. We might have different things that get thrown at us, different, experiences we go through, but it's all about how you handle it and how you look at it. And you are a perfect example of like having something completely change your life, or the same thing with what happened to your family member, which I'm so sorry happened, but seeing how you can extract positive things from it, or things that inspire you for like how you want to live your life. Like, that says a lot about you. And I think that's really, really imperative for people to hear, because your mindset really can alter like the course of your life. When you talk about this, I'm like, okay, who inspired you growing up? Like, where do you get all this like grit?
Well, listen, don't give me that much credit. If Megan was here right now, she'd be like, stop that.
She'd be like, you're full of crap, Ashley. He is not mature at all.
She talks more trash than I do now, which I love. So, a lot of it was my faith. I had a lot of great mentors in my life. I built a lot of great habits. Like when I came into the league, I was a great worker. I was smart. I was where I was supposed to be when I was supposed to be there. So I had a lot of great attributes to me, but I didn't share a whole lot. And it wasn't until I gained my faith where I became a consumer, like for real consumer. That's where reading became a massive deal in my life. And all of a sudden I was this crazy consumer. I wanted to read, watch, listen to every possible message that I could. So it was messages at church, books from pastors, books that, you and I got into a conversation and you shared a book that reminded you of this book. So I grabbed it and bought it immediately. And so just because I've consumed so much and had to sit here and chew on it, I felt like it's filled the cup. Mm-hmm. It helps me further define the vision for my family, my business, for anybody else, to help encourage people in my office. And so it forces me to continue to be coachable and malleable to be able to shift to where I need to be, as opposed to staying rigid in where I am.
Okay. So what's a book I need to read?
Well, man, I got lots. If you're looking at like vision for your financial life or anything like that, Poverty, Riches, and Wealth by Chris Volaton is excellent. First time I read that, I finished the book and I immediately turned it back to page 1. It's that good. And it's all about your mindset and all about your perspective and how you look at things. And so super, super powerful, but that's actually helped in my business. I get a ton of other pieces from mentors of mine, pastors, but other people that have just done really, really well. So if you're not a reader, you need to be one.
Absolutely. I need to be better about it. I listen to audiobooks, but I don't actually like physically read books very often unless I'm on like a vacation. But something about actually digesting it like physically in front of you. I don't know if it's because I grew up like right before computers or what, but I retain it way better when I actually like see it on paper. So you motivated me. Thank you.
Good.
Do you feel like this carries over then into like your new career? Like, I want to ask you some questions about that, because I'm trying to figure out in my head how you went from being an NFL player to getting into wealth management. And then where did the faith fit in? Was this in between all this, before football, during it all? And then does it all tie into what you do now?
It all ties in, but The timing of it was weird. Meaning,
Okay.
like, so I had football. I finished my degree. I finished it in psychology of all things, which was crazy interesting. But, I'm trying to figure out what the heck I wanted to do. And faith comes into it. And what happened is I started getting these speaking engagements. There's always a financial guy. All of them wanted to recruit me at all these big wirehouses, and they all wanted to have me in, and they liked the way I communicated and whatever. What was funny was I finally had to ask the question. I'm like, all right, what do you have me going into this? Well, it ended up this deep dive introspective search of like why I was interested in it. Well, the reason was it was communicated to me one day really clearly. It was remember the wreck. And I'm like, well, hold on a second. When I was a junior in high school, I rear-ended a lady. She ended up filing suit. It ended up being a huge financial detriment to my family a year later, where they had to start over. So witnessing that, I carried that into the NFL with me. What was wild is when I came into that, even though I made minimum 5 out of my 6 years playing, I was super protective. I didn't want that incident to repeat itself, right? And so the more I dug into this stuff, the more I found out that I didn't like. Athletes are not good with their money. Generally, anybody has some sort of windfall, is statistically, they're going to lose it really fast. And they're going to blow it. They're going to give it away, whatever the case might be. And why is that? Because they hadn't typically been able to develop the financial acumen to handle that appropriately. And a lot of people think that, like, man, if I just got $400 million, I'd be set for life. And that's not the case.
The behaviors you have, you're still going to have no matter how much money or how little money you have. So if you don't have that in place beforehand, all the wheels will fall off, it sounds like.
If you hadn't been responsible for what little you had, you're not going to do it for what big you had, typically, right? Mm-hmm. And on top of it, are you going to be the one that tells your family no when they all come with their hands out? Because I had that with one of my guys yesterday. His mom wants the house. That's mine. That should go to me. When he bought it for her and is funding her life. And respectfully, no, that's not the case. And so, when you've had a lot of people with their hands out, just think you got gobs of money for days or a giant cave filled with $100 bills burning, the whole world comes out. And so if you're not prepared to be able to handle that or mature enough to be able to handle that, it goes away completely. And if it's not managed meticulously, money just disappears. And so that's where the premise of the company is essentially protect the castle. Make sure the castle, there's not a back door open where a thief could come in and take it. And so we look for train wrecks. And that ended up being the premise. And that's why all bad turns for good, right? Because that was a good thing that happened in my life that ended up putting a protective feature in me where I wanted to make sure I couldn't lose what I had gained from the NFL. And then on top of it, when I do leave, that my wife and my babies are taken care of.
I think it's so cool, again, because you use your pain as your purpose. Like, you literally found something that was so painful in your life that probably traumatized you, and then used it as fuel to be like, I'm never going to put myself in this position again, and I will make sure I do everything I can. And I feel like that is so powerful, because that's where people end up finding their passion in life. And like, clearly this was where you're supposed to be right now, because you not only came from a background where people really did struggle with something like this, but you also have been through experience that you know what that feels like. So now you offer that for other people. I think that's incredible.
It's been awesome. We're growing. We got some good people on the team right now. I'm thankful for it. And we're going to continue doing that. And hopefully we get more on the team and keep this pattern happening.
Absolutely. Do you work with just athletes or like anybody, or what's like your main clientele?
I have some athletes. And the reason I have some is because there's a lot of immature guys. So there's a lot that just blow their money, like we just talked about. So we work with a lot of business owners because they've had to build that baby up from the get-go, and they don't want it to go away, right? We have a client right now who's passing just an amazing business off to her children. Well, they don't want to have that subject to a divorce or a lawsuit or creditor or other failing business potentially, where somebody can come attack that business that's doing so well, right? And another one in town, we had to, she was single, wanted to give it to her kids, but didn't realize that she had a taxable estate and was going to be forced to sell. The kids will be forced to sell the business. It's worth too much. And so they didn't have the taxes to be able to cover that estate tax when she passes. And so we had to fix that issue. There's a lot of people that are facing that, especially with this big shift that we have that's happening with baby boomers. But it's business owners, divorcees with complex assets, and then wealthy families that just have something worth losing. Our typical high net worth, ultra high net worth, minimum million investable assets, but typically our low end we'll see is about 3 million, but our average will be anywhere between 15 and 20, with some higher than that. Largest over 100, and it's just gone really, really well because that message has communicated. They're like, this is something that's super valuable that we've been able to build up in our life. We need to honor that by taking care of it and not letting it get threatened. You know, why do you keep a legacy of your parents? Because it's worth keeping the legacy, because it means something, because it's the work that they put into it, or whatever you're building right now. You're either adding on top of that or you're building your own.
My dad has built a business from the ground up, and we have like over 2,000 acres in Illinois. And like when he passes, like I want to continue to farm that, because that's it's something he built. And I would hate to just be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to sell it off and take the money. Like I feel like that's so like disrespectful in a way. And that's just for me personally, because he worked so hard to get where he is. And I want to keep that in the family. I feel like that's so important, and it's kind of a lost thing for some people, but for other people, and it sounds like a lot of your clients, like they care, they listen, they want to know like what to do with the things that they have worked so hard for, because it matters.
This is why we can be selective who we work with, because we had a guy who had a great windfall, similar deal, inherited a farm, ended up selling it to private equity for 10.8, did really good with it, right? Well, has two sons, wanted to pay off their mortgages and want to just be a blessing to them. What an awesome thing to do, right? I go, okay, this is the way we need to walk through that in order for those portions to be a representative portion of their inheritance when you pass. And so he goes, okay, you go explain it to him. You call him up. So I call both of the boys. Well, one is like, hey, whatever I got to do for dad, no problem. The other one is like, yeah, I don't like this. I'm not going to do that. And I'm like, well, what are you talking about? He goes, yeah, this doesn't make sense to me. I don't like the possibility of that. Yeah, I want this to happen. I don't want my mortgage anymore. I want him to pay it off, but I'm not going to sign any of this paperwork. And I go, you will, if you want a $730,000 mortgage paid off, you will sign this paperwork. And he ended up doing it, right? But there's a totally different attitude between the two. Mm-hmm. One is the person that walks into your house and said, dang, this is amazing. How did you do this? Ashley, tell me how you built this house. Like, this is incredible. The other person walks in, man, must be nice to have something like this.
Yes.
Get out of my house. Get out. One is walking in with respect because they know that there was work and that went into building this. The other person walks in and thinks that you were just giving it on a whim and nothing went into it. You know what? Look, we can all get blessed in a lot of different ways, but I'm not interested in that attitude, because that is somebody who just wants to take all day. That's the money that will drop through the hands and go away really fast.
That's exactly right. Like we've been talking about this whole time, all about mindset and how you perceive things. And it can really alter how you interact with people. It can alter how your life pans out, alter how you look at things. So it's very important to be focusing on your mindset constantly. And it sounds like that's something that has been important to you for a very long time. When you reach a level like that, now you have to judge people coming into your life and ask the question, why do you want to be with me? Mm-hmm. Like, why are you trying to be around me right now? And that's a real question. A lot of people, they kind of brush it off. The ones with the poor attitudes brush it off. And that's a lonely place to be, because a lot of times if you're leveling up in life, you're leaving one set of friends or people in your life into another. And that's that lonely place where they're like, hey, you're around them, but they don't quite trust you yet. That's on purpose, because I got to understand if you're actually in this as a genuine person and you're cool, not needing anything from me, or are you trying to sell me or really trying to get something from me? That's a guard that a lot of people that have built up that they have to keep on. That's a really good point to mention, because I've definitely learned that recently. You have to be very careful about who you allow in your circle, what their intentions are. And I always think people are good. And I've learned really quickly, like for whatever reason, when you're a business owner or you're successful or a hard worker, like you become a target for people that want to leech on you a little bit. And so I've definitely gotten more selective with the people I allow in, and I go a lot slower than I used to. And that should be the case. Are you a net positive or are you a net negative in my life? And it doesn't mean that you have to benefit me financially, but I tell my brother this. I go, you are a net positive because soulfully I want to be around you. I want to be around that person. They make me joyful. And that's somebody I do want in my life. And that's a net positive. Well, this has been so great chatting. I feel like we could talk all day. And yeah, sorry. We'll definitely have to do another episode soon, because I feel like I just had a therapy session with you and it was great. So Thank you so much for your time. Where can people find you if they want to get a hold of you to connect, reach out, maybe learn more about your wealth management company?
If you want to check out the website, procapitaltx.com, or you can just Google Pro Capital Wealth Management. But you can also follow me, Cory Procter, on Instagram, on X, and I think that's the only platforms I'm on right now. But you can Google me, find me somewhere. But reach out. I'm happy to talk.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Cory. It was so great having you. And I'll have to send you some skincare for you and your family so you can try out some of my products.
Oh, my wife will be jacked. Heck yeah.
I love it.
Hey, thanks so much, Ashley.
Well, until next time, be loud, be proud, and be shameless. Visit us at anskinbeauty.com to shop all of our medical grade skincare.